Welcome to the 2021 Annual New England Museum Association Conference. My name is Eric Kahan, the president of Collector Systems. I'm thrilled and honored to have the opportunity to be part of this conference where we are exploring, recreating, recharging, and reimagining our collective stewardship and custodial duties beyond that of your collections. Collector Systems is continuing to recreate, recharge, and reimagine the museum world's digital connectivity. We all know how the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the use of digital services and how we see and work with each other. By allowing access from anywhere to collections data and the ability to create, update, and manage all critical aspects of collections management, many of our institutional clients have realized the true benefit of cloud-based collections management. Collector Systems API and mobile platforms have helped our clients with online education, remote digital condition reporting, and real-time location updates. CS's ability to manage information, especially out of the confines of a physical building or desk, became an essential tool and advantage for our institutional clients, who took full advantage of our secure, intuitive, and powerful native cloud-based platform. CS is allowing museum professionals to do what they do best, wherever and whenever they need to. We need to continue reimagining the vital digital connectivity within the industry to expand opportunities for all institutions, regardless of location or budget. I hope we can come together as a community and as a nation to support each other through exploration, learning, innovation, listening, and acceptance of who we each are to each other. I hope in the years to come, be it virtually or together, we will continue re-us so we can work together for a better world. I'm excited to hear and learn from the insightful words of Michael Bobbitt so that we can be inspired to be better stewards of social justice. Have a great conference.
Okay, Eric, thank you so much to you and Collector Systems and to all of our sponsors of the NEMA conference. Well, again, welcome everybody to our Wednesday session. I'm Dan Yeager, the Executive Director of NEMA, and I'm very grateful that you're here with us today in this virtual space. This morning, we've got a very, very special guest, and I'm very excited to bring him on screen and have a conversation with him, Michael Bobbitt, the relatively new director of the Massachusetts Cultural Council. For those of you in the audience, what we're going to be, this is very informal, we're going to be having the conversation, and I want you to join in as well. So feel free to add questions and comments in the chat on the right side of your screen, and I will be taking a peek at those throughout our session, and we'll be teasing those out as well. But we've got a lot of ground to cover, and welcome, Michael. Terrific to have you with us. I'm going to read a quick bio, if that's okay. I hope I didn't make it up, and then we'll just sort of get into things. So Michael J. Bobbitt has dedicated his professional career to arts leadership. He's a theater director, choreographer, and playwright. On February 1st of this year, he joined the Massachusetts Cultural Council as executive director, becoming the highest-ranking cultural official in Massachusetts, where he has already made an impact by reorienting the agency's operations and grant-making towards greater equity and access. Prior to joining the MCC, he served as the artistic director of the New Repertory Theater in Watertown, Massachusetts, and before that, he was artistic director at the Adventure Theater MTC in Maryland for 12 years, where his work earned dozens of Helen Hayes Award nominations and garnered 8 wins. Michael's extensive experience in nonprofit arts management is through the Harvard Business School Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management, the National Arts Strategies Chief Executive Program, and Cornell University's Diversity and Inclusion Certification Program. He served as an associate professor of theater at both the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley and Howard University, and volunteered on numerous nonprofit boards, including Nonprofit Village, Maryland Citizens for the Arts, Leadership Montgomery, Weisberg Foundation, Watertown Public Art Commission, and Arts Boston. In 2021, he was selected to join Art Equity's second cohort of the BIPOC Leadership Circle. I've learned two things about Michael so far during our interactions over the last few months. First, he brings a fresh perspective to the region's art and culture sector. And second, he's not shy about articulating that perspective at all. Earlier this year, shortly before he joined the MCC, he made waves with an article published in American Theater Magazine entitled, "Boards Are Broken, so let's break and remake them." More on that later. And perhaps more important, under his leadership of the MCC, he recently published a racial equity plan that leverages funding and advocacy on behalf of parts of the cultural sector, which had been historically excluded from funding and expertise. Michael, again, thank you very much for being with us here today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Dan. It's really great to be here. And every time I hear all that stuff, I'm like, I should take a nap. But it's all exciting. I get out of bed to do this every day.
Quite a CV. All right, well, let me start out by just pointing out something here. You've landed at the MCC in what philosophers call a fullness of time. There's a lot going on right now in our field as cultural leaders, and change seems to be the air, and you seem to be ready, willing, and able to harness that change. You're really not wasting any time, are you, out of the gate?
Yeah, no, I think I either skipped the chapter in arts management school on pandemic management and racial reckoning, but no, I don't know. I think all my experiences have prepared me for crisis, and I think I thrive in those elements. I mean, when there's nothing to do, when there's no crisis, I'm agitated. I'm waiting for something to happen. But in my career, I've had to manage a couple of crises. I remember one time waking up to a lot of texts and voicemail messages on my phone, and the first one I listened to said, "I'm sorry to hear about the fire at your theater." So I had to figure that whole thing out. But no, I think I thrive in those instances.
Well, so would you consider yourself a change agent?
Other people have said that. They've used change agent, transition person. As an artist, I spent many years of my life working as an artist, expanding my mind to the creative process. And I think that artists are uniquely equipped to see the world differently. I mean, that's what we do. Imagination is seeing the world differently. Creativity is bringing the imagination to life, and art and artists are the vehicles and the product of creativity. And so my brain has just been expanded to all the ways the world can be different. And so I have learned to see what I want or what I hope for, and then try to get us all there.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the racial equity plan, because it's a significant moment, I think, for not only Massachusetts, but like types of documents are coming from other places as well. Give us a quick spin through the racial equity plan and what's behind it, and what do you see as being sort of the outcomes?
Sure. So there are several motivating factors for this. One is that, we are responding to the public outrage and outcry about racial inequities. Two, the governor put out a executive order, so did the president. And this is an extension of the 2017 strategic plan of Mass Cultural Council. So I'm just extending and deepening the work that we're doing. The staff had been doing racial equity training, anti-racism training, anti-oppression training for a few years. So they were itching to figure out how to actionize that. And then there are two main components of it. One is internal. What are we doing inside to make sure that we're freeing ourselves of inequities, of bias, circumventing bias, making sure that the voices of marginalized people are present in the decisions that we're making internally. And the second part is external, making sure we're trying to work with the sector to hold the sector accountable for the things that everyone has said they're going to do, but also offer some support. And some of those actions look like working with cultural equity learning cohort to build racial equity training programs for thousands of people a year. They're building it now. We'll hopefully launch it next summer, and then everyone can take these workshops free to you all online. And the second part is we're working with a couple of engineers to help us build a cultural equity diagnostic sort of exam where you can sort of do an internal audit of the work you've been doing. And it'll give you a score and hopefully suggestions for how you can improve that. You can use that with your boards to say, hey, here's some work we need to do. You can use it with your staff. You can use it with your constituents to sort of build on to that. But I'm very excited about it. And there's a lot of, each action step has probably 10 mini action steps to execute. But I do think it will help us really identify and start correcting some of the inequities that may be present in the sector.
Well, now this is really interesting because you just mentioned this scorecard type of approach, and you're actually quantifying something that fundamentally is, like your progress along an equity pathway or something, which seems a little bit qualitative, right? And is this something that's basically designed to be an advocacy tool or something to sort of show the public, here's how we're progressing?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think that whenever we get this thing designed, and I'm glad you said quantitative and qualitative, because that's the hard part about engineering this is the qualitative part. I think a lot of us that are putting action plans together and putting measurables to those action plans are really measuring quantitative things like how many board members, how many patrons, how many people on staff are people of color. But we still want to get to the cultural shift, which I think is the key to becoming anti-racist. How are you shifting a culture and making it not okay for racist or racism to exist in your organization or even to engage with your organization? So part of this whatever this thing is that is still being in early stages, it will measure the qualitative aspect so that everyone on staff can actually fill this document out and you get a real sense of where you are culturally and where you can make improvements. I do think it's important to measure the work you're doing. I think that sends a signal to the people that have been sort of marginalized that you really do mean it and you really want to track how you're doing and you really want to make improvements. I don't know if there's ever an endpoint to eradicating oppression in your organization, but at least you want to always be making progress. You don't want to finish an action and say, oh, now we're anti-racist. You want to keep always moving forward. I think of it like, and I don't know how the scorecard will work, but I think of it like a video game versus like a grade report. Like in a video game, when you finish one level, you go to another level and then another level and another level. So it never quite ends. And that's kind of what we're looking forward to trying.
All right, I'm going to be a bit provocative here.
Go for it.
And ask you this, or sort of lay this observation out. One of the 15 characteristics of white supremacy organizations is quantity over quality, right? I mean, we're fixated on numbers and outcomes and, quantifying everything. Is this, I mean, how is the anti-racist push in the racial equity plan consistent with trying to overcome those white supremacy bases?
So here's the thing I say to people, like racism and talking about racism and action plans about racism does not necessarily, it's something people of color don't want to do. Like it doesn't benefit us to talk about. This whole thing doesn't benefit us. It is white people's work to do this stuff. And so if quantitative and qualitative analysis is part of white supremacy culture, let's embrace that. And let's hopefully use the tools that exist in that culture to help organizations, predominantly white organizations, make improvements. So I think of it as a good thing.
So you're not selling out.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I've done that. I've done that too much in my career.
Right. Well, no, that it does make sense. All right, I'm going to ask another sort of baseline question. It really shouldn't need to be asked, but I'd love to hear you articulate it. And why is it important for a cultural entity to aspire to be anti-racist in the first place?
Well, there's nothing good about not being anti-racist, right? It's only bad things that exist when you are racist, because the opposite of anti-racism is racism, right? There's no such thing as not racist. I tell people all the time, and many other scholars that are doing the work around anti-racism also say this, that you cannot exist in this country as a white person and not benefit from the systems, the structure, and the institution of racism. So even if you're a good white person, you consider yourself not a racist, you still benefit from the same things that someone who is considered a bad white person or racist benefit from. So the only option you have is to be anti-racist. And if you're not actively anti-racist, then you have to think about sort of what you are doing. And so to me, beyond the idea of, this is where I hope I can sort of help people, beyond the idea of all the great things that come out of being anti-racist, especially for arts organizations, I want people to realize and think about this. When people of color talk about their culture and who they are, art and culture is inherently built into who they are. There's some Native American cultures that they don't even have a word for art because it's part of their fashion, their food, their pottery, their traditions. It's not separate. And so if you're an arts organization, your best potential customers are people of color because it's inherently built into who they are. And so once you start breaking down those systems and those barriers, and there's plenty that exist in the arts and culture field, some things that we didn't build intentionally, but we continue to perpetuate because we haven't invested time in inventing and pioneering new ideas. But once you start breaking down those things, you're going to see so many more people engaging with your organizations, and that could stabilize your financials because you're getting more resources and more bodies. It could open you up to more grants because the world of philanthropy is really going anti-racist. There's no bad thing about becoming anti-racist. And it just takes a lot of work. It takes really looking at every single thing you're doing and redesigning it. I also tell people that predominantly white institutions were designed to be that way. It didn't happen by accident. It also may not have happened out of malice. It's not like people said, well, in some instances that happens, but in most cases, especially in the arts and culture world, it's not that people sat around and said, I don't want people of color there, right? But the people that designed the organization may have been all white in predominantly white institutions. So inherently or without consideration or lack of perspective, white people designed their business model for white people. And so if you really want to become multicultural or multiracial, you have to redesign your business model with people of color involved. That means put them on your boards, on your staffs. Whenever you're discussing policies or decisions or programs, make sure that the room is as diverse as possible, because even if you are fiercely anti-racist as a white person, you still don't have the lived experience of people of color. So the best way to redesign your business model and to invite people in and break down barriers and systems that you may not be aware of is to make sure that the rooms where decisions are made are as diverse as possible. It's not going to happen any other way.
One of the things that I thought was very, for me anyway, very transformative was reading Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist book. And it got me understanding completely that this is a systems theory problem. And his, as I'm recalling, I'll butcher the quote, I'm sure, but it's something to the effect of when you call somebody an anti-racist, call somebody a racist, it's been a pejorative term, and it's like naturally people's defenses go up, and I am not a racist because I, do whatever, it's like your view of yourself. But even if you are actively, individually acting, in a way that is not being a racist, you're still a racist because of the systems you participate in. And he actually explains that people of color are racists, and like, wow, that because of the systemic piece of things, somehow you're actually part of these systems, and it makes it maybe easier to grapple with in some ways, but much harder in others, because you don't get away with just simply saying, I'm not a racist, that's somebody else's problem. You realize that we are all complicit in this world in which we live, and we are all then responsible for making the changes that make this a better society.
Profound. Yeah, I agree with Kendi a lot, except the idea that people of color can be racist. I get the idea that people of color can benefit from some of the systems of racism, but that's rare. That's rare. I mean, to me, the racism has three components. Three components. It's prejudice, social power, and legal authority. That's the three components of racism: prejudice, social power, and legal authority. I don't know of enough people of color as a body of people that have all three of those components. So that's where I sort of disagree that people of color can be racist. I think they can be assholes. They can say derogatory things. They can be bigots, right? They can say things that are race-based, but I don't know if they can benefit from the system of racism. So I disagree with him a little bit on that, but I do agree with him that like it really requires action. And I think, and I will also say, especially in the arts world, where we sometimes speak esoterically and artistically about things, we speak more about the belief system versus the action. And I think what's hard is that we need to like think about actions. Like, what is the action? What are you actually doing? I tell people all the time that racism is a very, very, very creative tool. It requires a tremendous amount of creativity. If you think about like the Georgia voter suppression laws, that's some creativity behind that. Like, what can we do to prevent people of color from voting? Let's sit down and create a bunch of ideas and see how we can infuse that into the law or get legal authority behind it. So to break down racism, and if you think about each sort of the house of racism is built by individual ideas, racist ideas, the little bricks, right? So we have to break down those ideas, and we have to come up with new ideas, new anti-racist ideas to build another house. And that requires double the amount of creativity of racism, especially because we have a 400-year head start on racism.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the actual funding system that we've got currently right now. Clearly, there are inequities in the funding landscape nationally, and in the racial equity plan, you quote some really pretty stark statistics, and I'm going to read these off to you. 30% of the U.S. population is Black and/or Latinx, but only 4% of the philanthropic sector's contribution goes to organizations led by Black or Latinx. So it's 30% of population, 4% of funding. Likewise, Alaska Natives and Native Americans represent 2% of the total US population, but receive only 0.4% of total annual funding from large US foundations. And Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders represent 7% of the population, but receive 0.2% of domestic foundation funding. That's a pretty steep hill to climb to put this into some kind of, restoration of equity here. And I guess two questions, it's like, what do we see as our pathway to making this more equitable? And then I guess another question, I'm reflecting on one of the questions in the chat from Marilyn about pushback. How much pushback is there from organizations to maintain the status quo, and how do they frame their pushback? So, it's a zero-sum game. There's only a limited pot of money. We start giving money to these other folks that have been historically shut out, but that means I'm not going to get it from my organization. Is that a pushback potentially as well? Anyway, what's the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things I can say about that. One, I think that one of the solutions of getting rid of racism, the institution, and I do believe it can actually be eradicated. It may take us 40, 50 years to do that, but I think it can happen. It requires ceding privilege. And that's the really hard part about it all, because people don't naturally want to cede privilege. And I think privilege is a very good thing. Sometimes it's used to weaponize. You have privilege, but really privilege is freedom from barriers and obstacles. And it's a thing that you can actually use to help you eradicate certain things. If you have privilege, you have power to sort of speak up and say things that and talk about things that are inequitable. So that's one of the things that we have to do. We have to cede privilege. And this country has lots of examples of having done that. Women's right to vote was not done by women. It was done by men ceding privilege to women. Gays' right to marriage was not done by gays. Gays made noise, but the laws had to be changed by the straight people that were in power, right? Similarly, you can think about all the civil rights acts that exist in the law books. There's not just the one in the 1960s. There are dozens and dozens and dozens. The inequities that exist, I think and this is sort of where I talk about systems and structures and institutions, that I don't think much of this was done intentionally, possibly. But when you think about the best practice that exists in the funding world and the philanthropic community, and these have been around for years and years and years, if you start breaking them down piece by piece, then you can start seeing some of the inequities. For example, letters of support. If you're a small, struggling nonprofit where you are the choreographer and the grant writer and the executive director and you're cleaning the toilets, you may not have the time to get a letter of support written by someone who is of significant stature that could then impress the panel. Why do we need letters of support? When you think about I've sat on many grant panels and read many grants, and oftentimes the discussion is the quality of the grant writing. And sometimes organizations will be dinged because their mastery of the English language isn't as strong. And so they'll get marked lower because they don't understand English. But if you are, again, a BIPOC organization, or English is not your first language, that shouldn't matter. It should be about the impact and the intent. So what can we do? Can we do video narratives? Can we do audio narratives? Things like matching grants, where if you're a small, struggling nonprofit, BIPOC or not, if you don't have the cash flows, now you have to raise the money to get the money, or reimbursements. There are dozens and dozens of things that we do in the process. I think the grant application to me is a customer service tool. To me, the grantees are the customers, and everything that we do is in support of you all. And so one of the things we can do is just make these grant applications simpler. It's a difference in it's the difference.
That's a different way of looking at it from a fundraising standpoint, because I know traditionally when you go for a grant, it's almost adversarial. It's like you're selling, you're making the case, and as opposed to let's work on this together collaboratively.
It's about intent and impact. That's the reason why we're supporting you. We're not talking about, and part of the thing that happened in the funding community was about accountability and such. But those accountabilities and those things we put in place created inequities. So the difference in to me, the customer service aspect of it is, and it wants to be easy. And I always think about the privileged and marginalized living here. So privilege is up here and marginalized is up here. If our processes focus on these people, then the gap widens, right? But if we think about the people that are going to have the hardest time filling out these grant applications, and we design the grants for them, then the gap will close and everyone will benefit. I'm sure everyone listening to the call will appreciate having a grant application that only takes a couple of hours versus 3 days, right? So everyone will benefit. So this idea of the anti-racism is like pie, and if I give up something, I'm losing something. That doesn't have to exist. But there are dozens of things like that exist in the process. And I think the thing about the grant application for me from a customer service place is the difference in self-check-in at the airport, which is really, really, really easy, which is why everyone is using it now for the most part, and self-checkout at the grocery store, which is so hard and so complicated, and you have to be a trained teller to make it happen, and there's always a misfunction. So that's kind of what we're thinking about at Mass Cultural Council. How can we really simplify these things? How can we take away things that require inequity? I mean, I always never liked the audit, because I have the budget, I have 990s, I have profit and loss statements. Why do I need to have an audit? Now I have to have a struggling nonprofit spend $5,000 to $20,000 to get an audit when I already have financials. So anyway, those kind of things we're thinking about internally. We haven't made any decisions, but we're at least starting to have conversations around those.
One thing, since we're segueing a little bit into the grant arena, we've noticed with great appreciation over the last 20 months or so that foundations and funders generally have been allowing for operation grants once again, and not just program oriented, consultant based, kinds of things, which has been very, very welcome, of course, and has enabled a lot of entities to really weather the storm during the pandemic. Do you see that as being something now that's going to be much more of a longer term thing, or was that just a pandemic fad? It seems equity's built into that, though, enabling organizations to have operating support.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of project grants, and we need to have a lot of conversations about that. And mostly because artists and arts organizations are already doing projects. So why are we asking them and making them do additional projects? I mean, I'm in favor of innovation because I think that the sector tends to not innovate as much as it should. I'm also hugely in favor of capacity building grants. There aren't that many people that are funding things like staffing, hardware, software, professional consultants. So those are the kind of things that I am sort of going to start working with the staff to do. But I do think that everyone is recognizing that the general operating is the best way to support organizations, and even started to have conversations around, there was this number out there, I remember, that you can only use 17% of the grant money for operations, when it's really more like 35% of the grant that's used for operations. So I think the philanthropic world is starting to have those conversations.
Yeah, good. All right, I'm going to read another piece of the equity plan, and this is your introduction, because I found this to be incredibly compelling. You introduce it in a way that invokes the powerful concept of love. You say, quote, "As a Black, gay, cisgendered, able-bodied, educated, Boston-based male artist married to a white man and the father of a Vietnamese child, I believe that racial equity, anti-racism, decolonization, diversity, inclusion, access, and all the words used to describe these incredible social justice movements are acts of love," unquote. Now, it stopped me short, because you do not often hear this in bureaucratic documents. And also, thinking about oppression usually triggers emotions of righteous anger, right? What do you feel is the interplay of love and anger here as an emotional root of what is, our pathway in the equity and the cultural nexus?
Yeah, I do. I really do believe that these are all acts of love. These are all ways of showing love to people that have may never have been loved by this country before. And I hope that motivates a lot of people. It certainly motivates me as a person who is in a position of power, but also sort of on the opposite end of it, that exists with racism every single day of my life. I think the anger comes from, again, this idea of ceding privilege. Like, again, ceding privilege and giving up power and giving up stuff is really, really hard for people. It's really hard. It goes against our nature to hoard, to have, to protect, to take. And what we really should be doing is taking care of the people who need it the most, so that we can all benefit as a society. When oppression exists, no one is free. No one is free. I can't think of one bad thing that comes out of any of the anti things or any of the movements for social justice. Only good things can come out of that. Only bad things exist when we maintain those systems. And I think that the hard part for it is that when people feel like they're going to give up power, it's going to feel like the 7 stages of grief. Because that power that you've had, that you've been given at birth, if you feel like it's being taken away rather than giving it up, then it's going to feel like loss. And I think that loss is going to be very hard. I think that's why we're seeing what we're seeing now in the world, that, there's violence and rage and anger about losing something that is only a perception of loss, not even in many cases real loss.
Well, so what advice would you give to a person that looks like me? I'm on this pathway, as you know, myself, and I've been talking with other folks who are, white males especially. What advice do you give to those of us who are in leadership positions that, we know that there's this expectation of giving up power, but how do we do that?
Well, I think in many cases, one, there has to be confession that this system, this structure, this institution exists, and I, as a white person, benefits from it. Without having to do anything, I benefit from it. So I think that's the first step. The second part is to educate yourself as much as possible And some of that education requires building relationships with people of color, deep and meaningful relationships with people of color. I remember one of the last boards that I ran, we made the decision that 50% of the board was going to be people of color. We were not going to elect another white person to the board until we got to our stated measurement. And you can have more. I certainly would push for more in any case, because we wanted to have the widest perspective in the room, and we have lumped all people of color into one category. But there was a push that there were some good white candidates, and I was like, no, we're putting value on the lived experiences of people of color. We want to make sure that the culture of our organization is broad, so that any decision that we make has the full breadth of decision. And so we're not going to elect any white people to the board until we get to our stated measurement. Then I said, once we get there, if we are going to elect people of color, it's important that we find out from them as an anti-racist organization what significant relationships they have with people of color. One of the true things about living in this world is that people of color have to have significant relationships with white people in order to succeed. That is not the case for white people. White people can be born, raised, educated, live, marry, die without having to have significant relationships with people of color. So one of the things I would suggest is to build relationships with people of color. So you can get, and the goal of that is to build your empathy, to understand that the belief system is rock solid. It was designed from the moment you enter this world, and everything you've experienced informs your belief system. And since we are dismantling the belief system, since we are learning that what we have been taught and learned and living in is different for various people, it requires a new belief system to be built, and that is going to require you to build your empathy. So that's what I would say. Just build relationships, continue to educate yourself, become active. I always tell people that every time you leave a conversation around racial equity, every conversation or every lecture or every workshop you attend, come up with a new anti-racist idea or one anti-racist action. If everyone did that for every conversation they're in, my God, we would have so many more anti-racist people out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to add one more from my perspective, taking liberties, if I may, and that is the full realization that it's not a zero-sum game when it comes to power. It's not a zero-sum game where I'm going to give something up and never get it back, because especially those of us that are in mission-driven organizations, we recognize that if we actually share power, it expands what we're actually doing. It expands our orbit, our effectiveness, and what have you. And it's the tough part, for me anyway, has been the leap of faith that giving up is in fact going to wind up in a place that's better, as opposed to me feeling, as though there's this scarcity inside of me. But that's something that, requires, I think, each of us to do the inner work as leaders and white people generally, to understand that sharing power, especially in this mission-driven framework, is something that's only going to enhance our effectiveness doing what we're doing. I hope that's in fact.
No, the more it becomes part of the zeitgeist that sharing power is a positive thing, I think the quicker we'll eradicate this racism. I do like to tell people that to me, decisions and law and policy exist on a bell curve, where we're trying to take care of most of the people in the middle, because it's hard, knowing that on the end of the bell curve, someone's going to get screwed. It's hard to come up with a policy and decision that takes care of all people. The problem we have in this country, and sometimes in our organizations, is that the people that make the decisions are homogenous, right? And so they unintentionally make decisions that exist like this, where the people that look like them are being taken care of the most, and the people that don't look like them are being taken care of the least. There are a couple of solutions. One, that homogenous decision-making body can become fiercely anti-oppression and start making decisions that look like this, where the people who we don't worry about them so much because they have the resources to get what they need elsewhere. And we focus on taking care of the people who need our help the most, especially in mission-based work. But even then, without diversity on that decision-making body, we're going to miss a bunch of stuff. So the better solution is to look at the diversity, look at the body of decision makers, and make sure they are as diverse as possible. And then we'll actually get back to the bell curve idea.
Okay, then this segues into that article I mentioned at the very beginning, which, I know a lot of folks that have read it have been, a little bit, their heads spinning around, wow, this is really something. You make some really interesting arguments about boards being broken, and we need to completely scrap the model. And if I'm reading it correctly, I mean, scrap the model and remake, here's how we actually do things, because fundamentally, we were built in this sort of the white patriarchal image, all of our organizations. And I love this image that you use. You talk about Spanky and the kids in our gang writing, making up their own rules as they go and saying no girls allowed or whatever. But effectively, that's where we are with a lot of our boards, is that they're so inward focused and so focused on their own structure and practices and creating their own clubhouse that they fail to actually address stakeholders in the organization and their missions. And that, of course, is one of the recipes for continued entrenchment of white patriarchy. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, we could talk 3 hours about this, Dan. I just think an institution that requires to have had so many books, so many workshops, so many lectures, so many articles about how it doesn't work and how you can improve it, yet it still doesn't work, is not something that we should continue to maintain. It needs to be redesigned. It's not doing what we intended for it to do. And I think maybe in the beginning, it probably did, but through the years, boards have designed their own best practices and they've been made up. Most of them have nothing to do with the IRS legal document and the statute or the state statute. It's just things we've made up and we have just turned them into best practices. And so I don't know if it makes sense to continue to try to put lipstick on this pig or kind of tweak it or do more training, especially for boards that are transient, where people are on the board for a few years, invest all that training and training them, and then they leave. I think the whole thing needs to be redesigned. And I think that we creatives can be part of that redesign. The one example I used in the article is that, almost every board I've been on or managed, it took me about 10 hours a week to manage it, right? It's all kinds of stuff. It's building reports and documents that they never read. It's scheduling the meetings and re-meetings and the committees and the planning. And it's just so much work. And so 10 hours a week is a whole week out of your month, one whole week dedicated to managing this body of people, typically who are not experts in the thing that you are doing. It's like having a staff of people that don't know what they're doing, but now you have to, but they're also your boss. Out of your year, that's 3 months out of your year, 3 whole months dedicated to managing this body that is in many ways ineffective. I think it just needs to be redesigned. And I could go on forever, but people can read the article.
Well, so in a nutshell, what would your ideal board look like?
I don't know. I mean, I think that we need more engineers and smarter people to redesign it. But I definitely think that it should look like the community that you're trying to serve. Because if you want a board that is advising you on what's happening in the community, which I think should be their biggest goal, then build a board that looks like the community. I also think we have to divorce this notion of fundraising and fiscal and fundraising and development from being on the board, because there will always be a power dynamic. When someone on the board writes you a check, there's always a power dynamic. It will never go away, no matter how altruistic they are. So I think that needs to be divorced. And I've seen a couple of examples where people have a board of directors and then a committee of fundraisers, where people are just fundraising. They don't have a lot of power, but they're fundraising. I also think that it should be a 360 thing, that the staff should really be building the gap analysis for what skills they want and need on the board. I think they should all align to the strategic plan. Often we build these strategic plans and we don't restructure our staffing or our board to help us get to our strategic goals. So these plans sit up on our desks and they don't happen. I also think that the staff should be involved in evaluating the board to make sure they are doing the things that they said they were going to do. And if they're not doing it, then they shouldn't be on the board. But it's just a big mess. And I just really think they need to be redesigned.
So what is Mass Cultural Council doing to help change that landscape?
I don't know if it's in our purview to do that. I mean, I'm blessed to have a pretty decent board, and I spend about, I don't know, 45 minutes on them a week, which is a lot different than a nonprofit board. I don't know if we really have it's in our purview to sort of make those decisions. I can personally talk about it on my own, but I have had some conversations with people that run sort of these nonprofit service organizations about collectively coming together. I'm willing to fundraise to help raise money to have a bunch of brainiacs and really smart people and like executive leaders from all over the world come together and redesign some things and put it out as new best practices. But I think it requires the nonprofit community to say enough is enough. We need to relook at this.
Well, maybe your leadership and soapbox is, the thing that'll take to at least catalyze discussion on it. So, but it seems as though there might be some incentivizing somewhere along the line. Okay, so it's about 1:15, and I'm going to use this opportunity to encourage everyone to throw their questions and thoughts into the chat. These lines are open, as they say on our talk show radio channels. Michael, okay with you if we answer a few questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
So here's one from Lisa. What is the best way for a predominantly white institution to reach out to enlist members of the BIPOC community to become involved? And I'm gonna append that one too, because one of the things that I hear from folks frequently is, I would love to become more diverse, but hey, this is New England and I'm up in the middle of nowhere, somewhere that doesn't have any BIPOC people. How do I do that? They get off the hook that way.
Yeah, there are a couple of things I can say. One is that it may be difficult to be diverse. It doesn't prevent you from being anti-racist. Those are two separate things. So that's one thing. Secondly, often what happens is people reach out to the BIPOC community for help, but you have to think about the racialized trauma that BIPOC people have gone through in this world. So you wouldn't go to someone who's been sexually abused and say, what should I do, right? What you would do is say, here's what I'm going to do. Tell me what you think about this, right? Elicit their input on what you have already designed and planned to do. So the first thing I would say is everyone should spend time building their anti-racist action plans. Action plans are really great ways to show that you really mean business. I think of it, so here's how I explain it to people. If you've ever been cheated on before, you become hyper vigilant, right? The person can say, I will never cheat again. But in your brain, you're like, where are you going? What time are you going to get home? Let me see your text. Who you email? Why are you talking to him? Why are you talking to her? You just become hyper vigilant. And that's because you want their action to prove that they will never be cheated on again. Anything else, anything they say is just lip service. So if you think about it, what have we done to BIPOC people in this country for years and years and years? We have made these solidarity statements. We have said, we're never going to do this again. We're going to fix it. We put out belief statements, yet we haven't really followed it up with actions. I also say, as a gay person, I know a space is safe because there's a rainbow flag posted somewhere. So I know I can walk in there and they're not going to be assholes making comments and stuff, right? So your action plans are a signal. So if you start with that, it doesn't have to be an intensive document like the one I created. It can be a list of, here are the 12 things we're going to do. Here are the 15 things we're going to do, the actions that have measurables. Then you take that to people of color and you say, hey, here's what we have committed to doing. We'd love to get you involved so we don't miss anything. I think you're going to get a lot of support on that. I think you will engage a lot more people.
So how do you avoid the shadow side of diversification, which is tokenism? How do we keep from, okay, now we've done our job. We have, we've reached out, we've gotten folks on our advisory committees, we've got people on our board, but they're still token.
Listen to them.
Feel their token.
Listen to them. Listen to them and do what they are asking you to do. So if you remember that photo, I don't know, it was 5 or 7 years ago about the women's, the Congressional Committee on Women's Reproductive Issues that came out. Do you see that photo? It was all white men making decisions about women's bodies, right? So what would happen if one woman was invited to be on that committee? Would she get anything done? Probably not. Probably those men would have a hard time ceding their privilege to that one woman. The truth is, to avoid tokenism, is that they should listen to everything she says. Who's more of an expert, she or them, right? And so when you invite people of color into the conversation, listen to them, believe them, take the actions that they're suggesting. This is what often happens. We bring people of color on the board because there's pressure from the outside to do this, from funders or whatever. And that those people of color know they're being brought on the board to diversify, yet they're not able to do that work because organizations are like, no, I don't want to do this. We're moving too fast. This is going to make us vulnerable. This is going to hurt the financials. Listen to them. That is how you avoid tokenism.
So here's a question from Austin. There are legal structures which systematically support or promote racial tendencies. Can education and intellectual persuasion alone revert those systematic issues, some of which are probably supported by law? So I'm not sure if I'm reading this correctly, but
laws can be changed.
Right. And it's interesting too with maybe so there's legal, I guess race, and again, one of the things that I really struck home to me in reading Ibram Kendi's book is race is a social construct. It's not like a predefined, it was begun in the 1600s, right? With the advent of slavery to justify slavery. So all of these legal constructs around race and those types of, well, race specifically, are basically,
we made them up.
Phantasms.
It came out of ideas. I go back again to ideas. So every bit of oppression starts with an idea. In the arts and culture world, we say Shakespeare was the greatest playwright of all times. That was one person's idea that he sold to a bunch of other people. Then that was institutionalized. Then it became interpersonal because classically trained actors looked down on non-classically trained actors. And then it became internalized because if you weren't a classically trained actor, you didn't feel like you should audition for these shows, all kinds of things. Same thing in the dance world. Ballet is the best form of dance, right? That one person who saw ballet may not have seen any other form of dance, but yet they put it out there as the best form of dance. And then it just became, so ideas have a lot of power. What we have to do is have ideas. Laws are mostly based on precedent and ideas. And so all we have to do is have, and they get changed all the time. We have to make sure we show up at the public square in enough mass and make sure that the people who made the rules are the ones who are changing the rules. It's possible. Yeah.
So here's one from Ida, which is interesting. Ida says, wait a minute, somebody just jumped me out of my, here we go. Ida says, I have been a, quote, token for 3 decades. Ida is African-American, I believe, at least from the photo. I have been a token for 3 decades, but I considered myself more of a trailblazer so that other BIPOCs could see that someone else was involved in museum leadership. So she's been a token for 3 decades, but she's hung in there.
Yeah.
I'm imagining that's not unusual.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Involved in the struggle.
Yeah, thank you, Ida. I think that I appreciate your being a leader that way, and I think this is. I think I can relate to you in many, many ways. I am one of 2 people of color on the mainland of the USA running a state arts agency. There are others in our provinces like Guam and Puerto Rico, but on the mainland, one of 2 people of color. And that can be hard, a lot of pressure. What I would say, there are a couple things I would say. One is that I think the work in the anti-racism, anti-oppression world that people of color need to do is to focus on understanding racialized trauma, radical self-care, unpacking colorism, unpacking internalized racism, where they have contributed to white supremacy culture, so that you can be healthy in this battle. It's not your job to fix the stuff that white people did. It's your job to become healthy about this. The second thing I would say, and this is where ideas are really important and where we as creatives have a lot of privilege, because we are brilliant at coming up with ideas, is that pioneering is inherently dangerous because no one knows what's going to happen. But that's exactly what we need to build this house of anti-racism. We need a bunch of anti-racist bricks to build this house of anti-racism. And if people aren't willing to have ideas and to try new things, we're going to be stuck in this system for a long time. At New Rep, some of the ideas that we were exploring was getting rid of the subscription model, because subscriptions give privilege to people that already have privilege. Surely there's another loyal patron program that can benefit all. Things like at the point of purchase, we were talking about having a button that you click where you look at the community anti-racist agreements, and before you finish a ticket purchase, you have to click that button. We had a racism incident report, so that we can report any racism that anyone has ever experienced in the organization, whether or not you're a patron or staff or a board member. So we can really look at what the punitive process is, what the restorative process is, and what the transformative justice process is. But those are the kind of things we need to keep innovating in our organizations. And the more people you involve in that innovation, the better you'll be, the better you'll come up with new ideas.
I was going to ask you about the intersection between the theater performing arts world and the museum world. And it was, I'm thinking about it in the context of this whole pursuit of anti-racism. Strikes me, of course, that many folks have observed that the performing arts field is characterized by an opportunity, an ongoing opportunities, that you have a perishable product, you have seats that you need to fill all the time. The museum field is a little bit more laid back when it comes to visitation. It's not like I have a certain number of, I don't have a quota that I need to fill this museum every single day. So we tend to back off a little bit, and things are a little bit less urgent with, we need to do this, or we have this opportunity to fill these seats. And I think that mentality, well, I don't think, I'll ask, how does that mentality affect the way folks in the performing arts view, customer service, anti-racism? It's all kind of as a piece. And how can we in the museum field adopt that attitude that has a little bit more, let's get this moving, let's get this out there?
I go back to ideas. You need to generate ideas. I think there's a 400-year head start. If we were playing Monopoly, right? If all of us were playing Monopoly, and all of a sudden I decided that, before we started the game, I decided that because I had brown skin, I was better than white people. And then I had it proven by science and religion, right, that I was better than white people. Therefore, in the game of Monopoly, the brown people got the chance to play first for 2 hours. So I invite all the brown people to play Monopoly first for 2 hours. So we're buying up everything. We're making cash. We're building up generations of wealth. And then 2 hours later, we say, okay, white people, join in. I think it'll be hard for white people to win. Although we can tell them, if you work hard, you can win, right? Right. So in that instance, whose issue is it to fix it? Right? It's the people that made the rules, possibly, but that requires them to be willing to fix it. I'm not sure that's the case. I think it's about policymakers and leaders saying, no, culturally, this is not okay. We have to fix it. So that 2-hour head start is a big gap. Span that to a 400-year head start, right? So we don't have time to sit back and rest on our laurels. We have to be super creative and super innovative around anti-racist ideas. That's why I say to you, every time you leave a conversation around this, come up with one new idea and share it with people and try to execute it, because that's what it's going to take. So I say the museum world, investigate the whole museum aspect and say, what can we do to eradicate systems that maybe marginalize people or make people feel like they can't come and enjoy the works of art that we have.
Michael, that's a brilliant idea. Everybody, we're asking you to waterfall some ideas. What's the one thing that you can do to be anti-racist in the chat right now? Drop them in, and we'll save the chat and promulgate that somehow. It's a brilliant idea.
I will also say two other things I want to say, because I know we have to go, but I really encourage the museum community to carve out time and resources for innovation, especially around the digital world. We need new ideas. I think our spaces are going to be vulnerable for many, many years. I remind people that back in the 40s, when the polio virus hit, buildings were closed for 5 years. There wasn't a hybrid and a slow return. They were closed. So I think we're going to have trouble with reclaiming our audiences for a while. And the digital world gives us some opportunity to do some really, really, really cool stuff. I imagine, look at what they did with sports and how they brought sports into people's homes and how cool they made the experience of watching sports at home. Everyone had a front row seat. You got colorful commentary, you got instant replays, you got pop-ups and pop-up bios about the players. You can pull in close to see the sweat on their faces. There's all kinds of innovation that can happen. And I also think that soon we're going to see the shifting in marketing, which was how do we convert our in-person patrons to online patrons? It's going to shift. You're going to have to start working on converting your online patrons to come into your museums once or twice a year. And so we need space, we need time to support that. I'm hoping with this ARPA money, I can sort of direct some spending to support the digital world, either the innovation of it, buying equipment, buying software, hiring content people. If you're in Massachusetts and you know anyone on the conference committee debating between the House's version of the budget, which was 125, and the Senate's version, which was 75, please, please, please reach out to them today, because they're debating today, and say, do what Michael Bobbitt asks you and support the House version of the bill, because we really do need $125 million for the cultural sector. And I would appreciate that.
Well, Michael, this has been fascinating. You are clearly a very articulate spokesman for your agency and also for the community. And I think that you being here in our midst in Massachusetts and New England generally, and of course in the national landscape, is really a testament to your leadership and your enthusiasm for what we are doing. It's very palpable, even through the screen here. And I will say this, is that the only learning that takes place is when you move out of your comfort zone and into your challenge zone. And you have moved us into the challenge zone, which is really good. We need to do that. We need to get out of our complacency and our comfort zone. So thank you so very much for being with us here today. Thanks for having me. Learning starts where knowledge ends, when I say to people, and I'm doing this out of love. And so I hope people will continue to move forward. So thank you for having me. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye now.